Danny Nicasio, otherwise known as Danny Guzman. To this indictment, how do you plead, guilty or not guilty?
Not guilty.
On indictment number 2, armed assault with intent to murder, guilty or not guilty?
Not guilty.
Indictment number 3, possession of a firearm not at home or at work, guilty or not guilty?
Not guilty.
Indictment number 4, possession of ammunition without an FID card, guilty or not guilty?
Not guilty.
And indictment number 5, assault and battery with a dangerous weapon, guilty or not guilty?
Not guilty.
Question of bail.
Thank you, Your Honor. By agreement, the Commonwealth and Defense Counsel have agreed that the defendant will be held without bail, without prejudice. In support of that, the defendant being held without bail, I can suggest to the court that the defendant, that the facts of the case are that on December 24th, 1999, at approximately 2 o'clock in the morning, the defendant, Mr. Novas, who was here before you, was at a local nightclub in the city of Worcester, that there was an incident between the defendant and the 2 complaining witnesses. There was a verbal argument that spilled outside into the street. While outside, multiple witnesses reported that one of the witnesses struck the defendant in the face, at which point he removed a firearm from within inside his clothing or jacket. He shot one individual, Mr. Nicasio, in the chest, and the other individual, Mr. Masonette Jr., in the shoulder. The defendant then fled the scene. Multiple known parties to the defendant did witness this. The complaining witness, Mr. Nicasio, was taken to the hospital where he was later pronounced dead. Mr. Masonette was treated for his injuries. Multiple witnesses and a police officer saw the defendant flee the area towards a red Honda. Multiple witnesses reported that later on that night, the defendant returned to his apartment. He was disheveled, he was not wearing a coat, he was cold, that he made a few phone calls and left that apartment at 3 o'clock in the morning where someone picked him up outside. Further witnesses stated that, further investigation revealed that near the red Honda, fingerprints of the defendant were found. They did have his known fingerprints on file, and those fingerprints matched fingerprints on the red Honda. There was also 2 shell casings that were found in the area. Several days later, the investigation, there was information that children had found a firearm near that location. That firearm was recovered. That firearm had the fingerprints that matched those fingerprints of Edwin Novas. The firearm was also a match to the shell casings and found in the area, and would have consistent markings with the bullet that was removed from Mr. Nicasio. The defendant was found to be in the Dominican Republic. He was born in the Dominican Republic and has significant ties to the Dominican Republic. He's been living there for approximately 20 years. The fingerprints that I've referenced many times were sent to the Dominican Republic, and they were the basis for which there was a presidential decree ordering that the defendant be returned here for prosecution. Thank you, Judge.
All right. Thank you.